Hey guys, thought I'd narrate a little bit of welding action today. We're welding up the cantilever arms for our S10 4-link kit. So, didn't really make sense to try to talk while I was working. As you can see, I'm using all of my mental capacity just to lay down beads. So I figured I'd just narrate as we go. So we sprayed down the sides with some anti-spatter spray. We're going to be laying a lot of welds down into 90-degree valleys, so it does throw a lot of sparks around, and that spray seems to cut down on the amount of little berries that stick. So I'm using a Miller Multimatic 220 welder. It does MIG and TIG in one unit, and I've been really happy with it. We're using 030 wire, and this is on the 3/16 setting. So we're welding 3/16 top and bottom plates, and the side plates are actually 1/4 inch, but the 3/16 setting gets plenty of penetration in there. The 1/4 inch just gives it a little more vertical strength. So we're just welding and trying to manage that heat as we go. So you'll see me moving the arm around, trying to find the next section to weld as we go. We can't just weld one long shot or the whole thing will warp out. So here's me thinking I'm going to weld there, and then nope, let's flip it around, and there we go. Alright, I'll be quiet so we can just listen to some lovely sizzling metal. I try to keep the weld puddle sort of moving forward. I'm angling the nozzle into the weld. Some people drag, some people push. I find push makes for a nicer looking weld, although they both seem to be plenty strong. There we go. Keep that heat moving around. One of the keys to getting a good looking weld bead and consistent looking is to really keep your arms really close to your body as you weld. The further out you've got your arms, the more tiny little muscle movements tend to be exaggerated. So you end up moving the nozzle around quite a bit more. So I'm keeping my arms tucked really close. I'm using my left arm or my left hand to brace my right and hold the tip of the welder right where I want it. Another thing that I've discovered is those weld sparks hitting your mask, your welding hood over time. You don't notice just how bad the lens on your welding mask is getting until you decide to finally change it and realize just how blind you've been. So those things are cheap and pretty easy to replace. So I tend to do mine about once a week with the amount of production welding we do. And that makes such a big difference in being able to see what you're doing and keeping that weld consistent. when we first started making these 4-link kits, we were using box tubing to make these cantilever arms, and just angle cutting 2 sections of it to set the bar angles, and welding up that seam where they meet, and then having to weld tabs on the end for the dog bone to attach, and welding a plate on top for the bag to mount. About a year and a half ago, we switched over to this design that uses 4 separate plates fully welded together, and it's just gives it that nice fabricated look. Just not something that looks homemade. I'm sure the strength is similar. The box tubing ones worked fine. There's lots of guys out there running those, but we wanted something a little bit fancier. But it definitely requires a whole bunch of welding. We've got about 2 feet of weld times 4 per arm, and then there's 2 arms. So that's a lot of little beads. I think we're on the last run of the first arm, or the last 2 runs. These are the longest welds on each arm. Alright, it looks like we're finally wrapping up the main welding on the first arm. So we're going to set that one down by the fan to cool down, and we'll grab the second arm and do the main welding on it. We still have some bushing ends to weld on, but we're going to let everything cool down a little bit before we tackle that portion of it. We'll go ahead and skip ahead here You don't need to see all of the welding action twice. Once was boring enough. So let's skip ahead. We've got the second one basically welded just like the first. So we'll take it, put it down in front of the fan, and bring the first one back up. There's a seam on the top portion. Well, it ends up being the bottom of the arm that needs to be welded up. And for this, I'm going to use the TIG function on that Miller welder. I find it just gives a cleaner weld when you're welding up a tiny little seam like that. So grab the foot pedal, turn on the gas, hooked up the water cooler, and putting on the fancy gloves that have no heat protection. And for this, we're using 1/16 just standard bronze filler rod, TIG rod. So we'll get this welded up on the first arm. If you look, you can see me there. I'm raising my hand off of the arm because it's still friggin' hot. So we're hovering a little bit, but the bead still turned out good. Usually you want your hands really well supported when you're trying to TIG weld. Those small movements make a big difference in the look of the weld. So we'll grab the second arm, which is still way hot, and we'll go ahead and weld up that seam on it too. That should be it for the TIG welding. So I'm going to go grab the bushing ends and switch the machine back over to MIG welding, and we'll switch gloves and everything, and get those bushing ends welded on the ends of the cantilever arms. The bushing ends are 2-inch quarter wall DOM tubing. Uses basically a 3-inch bushing width. It's got a zerk fitting in there for the urethane bushing to keep it greased. So I'm just lining up centering the bushing end and making sure that that zerk fitting points straight up, and then I'll tack it in place on the top portion of the arm, flip it over, and we'll throw some nice fat welds on there. You see all those sparks flying? I did not spray this one down with the anti-spatter spray, so I'm going to have a little bit more cleanup to do when we wire wheel it. That's okay, it's still not bad. So weld the top and bottom of the bushing end in using the 1/4-inch setting on the welder, and then I will turn it down to the 3/16 material setting for the sides, since we're just sort of filling in a smaller gap. We don't need the big chunky weld along that edge. That's one completely welded. That one's still hot. Alright, same deal. We're just going to weld that bushing end into place. I remembered the spatter spray this time. I may be a slow learner, but I do learn. Alright, last run of weld. Alright, with the welding done, we're going to take out the bolt. We keep that bolted in with a bushing spacer just to make sure nothing moves around while we're welding everything up. And if we've done our job right, that bolt will come right out and the sleeve just drops right out. So far so good on one of them. We're just going to switch over to a wire cut on the grinder and clean these up. Of course, you should always wear safety glasses around anything that's throwing metal or sparks, but especially with a wire wheel. Those little wires, I've dug them out of my skin. I don't ever want to have to get one dug out of my eyes. So all we're doing here is just running along all the welds and the flat surfaces and just knocking off any excess weld spatter. The anti-spatter spray leaves a little bit of a gummy kind of surface on the metal, so we just like to wire wheel that off as well. Just make it look nice and clean when it comes out of the box. Now I'm just taking a hammer and a flat blade screwdriver and any of the little spatter berries, whatever you want to call them, that didn't want to come off. We're just knocking them off. Alright, rinse and repeat for the second arm. Let's see if anything moved around at all or if that bushing end's just going to fall right out. Nice. That hole you see in the side of each arm is access for the bolt to bolt the airbag onto the lower plate. So you can made it large enough to get a wrench in there and be able to cinch it up nice and tight. Again, just knocking off a couple little bits of spatter. They don't hurt anything, but we want it to look good. Alright, let me grab the camera off the tripod. We'll show you these things. So there you have it. We'll go ahead and get them down by the fan for a little bit, let them cool down, and they'll be ready to ship out with the rest of the kit. Let me show you that kit. Alright, that's just about it. This is the complete S10 4-link kit, ready to box up and ship off. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, all the other YouTube stuffs. Thanks again. We'll talk to you next time.